Last week, I started making a game for the Playdate where you use a crank to control a giant laser gun to launch yourself upwards and dodge obstacles. It plays kind of like a mix between Doodle Jump and Downwell, but upside down. I had bigger plans for it, like collectible power-ups and more obstacle variations. But I realized I was falling into the classic game developer trap: scope creep. Scope creep is when you plan out more and more ideas for your game. But this can cause a huge problem. Motivation is the lifeline of your game, and I found out through experience that if I have too many planned features, I would get unmotivated and never finish. It was time for me to aggressively cut down on my game to the core features and close up my game loop. Once I'm there, I can decide whether or not I want to add more features. But at the very least, I would have a finished and playable game. Let me show you how I use that philosophy to guide my development and finish my game. The first core feature was displaying the score after your run gets ended by hitting an obstacle. First, I made it so the game takes a screenshot of when you get hit and blurs it. This would be the screen to display the results. Then, I made an animation of the results screen sliding out of the way and restarting the game. I actually really wanted to make a more advanced transition than the sliding out animation, but sticking with my own advice, I decided on a pretty good transition with minimal work, as opposed to a great animation that takes a lot of work. The simple sliding animation was a good compromise. I then added in a dialog box that shows the height you ended up at, as well as the max height you reached, keeping it really simple. I notified the player when they got a new high score by just appending new to the text. It helps a lot to manage scope by implementing medium or high value changes that require low effort. At this point, I tested the changes on device, but realized that I was actually having some performance issues. Blurring the background is a pretty computationally heavy operation, so it was lagging a lot. I changed the approach a bit, which made it better, but it was still slightly slow. However, it was good enough at this point, so I left it to work on more important tasks. Good enough is better than unfinished. Next step was to create a title screen. I had an idea to have different parts animating in. This is what that turned out like. It was relatively simple to implement, but I thought it looked pretty good. I called it Escape from Complex 32, since I imagined you played as a little robot trying to escape the complex you were created in. In the beginning, I actually wanted the player to be an alien trying to escape, and I tried to draw the alien, but it wasn't working out at all since I'm not that good at art. I felt my motivation slipping, so I just imagined what was supposed to be prototype art as a robot instead. I realized the player art wasn't really an important feature in my game, so I cut it. Next task was to create a scene transition. I ended up making the circular one, which looked pretty good. For this transition, I also wanted to make a more advanced one, like a sliding gradient, but settled on this since it was a lot less work. Something that's been bugging me for a while is that the player can actually fall indefinitely. Since this could put the player in an unrecoverable state, I deemed it a core feature. My plan was to add a bed of spikes that moves up as the player moves up, but stays in place when the player falls down. You can see that functionality implemented here. I then moved the spikes off screen and added collisions to it, so you can see now that the player will eventually hit the spikes when falling. I only had the laser sound effects, so I went ahead and added sound effects for everything else in the game. Let's have a listen. You can see that if I quit and restart the game wasn't saving your high score, so I added that functionality in as well. With that done, I managed to wrap up the core game completely in 1 week, which I don't think I would have been able to achieve if I didn't manage scope creep and balance value to effort. I think that's been the most useful skill in my game dev journey so far, so I encourage you to think about that when you're making your next game. If you want to try the game out, it's available for free. Check out the description, but make sure to subscribe first. My awesome Patreon supporters make these games and videos possible. They also get early access to my games, plus the source code. Thanks, and see you next time.